All right. Well, man, I am really, really excited to jump into this conversation. So let me just start by introducing, I guess, myself if I need to do that. But my name is Ryan, and I have the honor of being the lead pastor at First Christian Church, and I'm joined by two friends of mine and two fellow FCCers as well. Um, Reverend Moss. So, Reverend Moss, well, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everybody. So good to miss everybody,
Yeah.
FCC and the community. And I thank Pastor Ryan for giving us the opportunity to share today.
Yeah, so excited to jump into this. And then also my friend Chris. So Chris, do you want to jump in as well and say hey?
Yep. Hey, everyone. I really do miss going to church. I can't wait for us to get back together. And I am as well thankful that Ryan reached out for us to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a great conversation. I'm just grateful to the two of you. I know that there are probably better things that you could be doing, but I think this is a really, really important conversation. And so I don't know if there's a better thing that we could be doing than honestly trying to figure out how we can just be light in the midst of, I think, a lot of darkness right now, and a lot of people trying to navigate a lot of different stuff. And so we're going to have a conversation for the next hour or so on the racial divide that we're seeing right now and the racial tension that we're seeing right now. But my hope and my prayer for this conversation is that we can just kind of be educated, that we can take steps forward, that we can grow in understanding. And specifically for me as a 38-year-old white guy and a pastor of a predominantly white church, my hope and my prayer in this is that this conversation can help our church to continue to take strides forward in diversity and continue to take strides forward in growing in love and empathy and understanding, and really walking out our vision statement that says whether you're white or black, rich or poor, addicted, sober, whatever, that Jesus is for you. And And so that is my hope and my prayer. And so again, thank you guys so much for being a part of this.
You're welcome, man.
Yeah, yeah. So let's start here. I kind of joked before we hit record that I think we probably have had. So I'm a white kid who grew up in the suburbs. Didn't have to face really any hardship whatsoever when it came to how people viewed me, my skin color, that kind of stuff. Um, I would love to hear just a little bit, again, if we're trying to get understanding and kind of trying to build a foundation here, I would love to hear a little bit of your guys' story on what it's been like to grow up as an African American person in a fallen world that we live in. So why don't we start with you, Reverend Moss, if you don't mind?
No, I don't mind. Thank you. Well, I was just thinking about that, and I grew up here in Canton in the projects, and as a little boy, all I knew was living basically in the projects. In 1970 something, when I graduated from high school, got a scholarship to Ohio University, play a little bit of football. I didn't know that was going to change my life. It was also in college where I got called into the ministry. That's important too, because it helps me with my perspective today. But growing up in the projects, I learned quickly that I was called disadvantaged there was the system, the teachers. And so it was like I had to prove myself. And it was kind of like they automatically said, you're at a disadvantage. And I don't really believe that, but I believe that was society saying, because of statistics, because of where you are now, you are a disadvantaged person. But inside of me, I didn't believe that. I believe God had some purpose for my life. And I think when you put stigma on people, sometimes if they can't get past that stigma themselves, then they begin to believe that, and you don't excel, I believe, as God really wants you to excel, and you can get into things that really hold you back. And it really wasn't until I finally got to high school that I really realized, well, what happened, I was behind in a grade. And in junior high, I had an African-American principal came up to me and said, Walt, I know you can do the work, and I'm going to put you back up. And I grew up without a dad. He said, I know we're going to put you back up because I know you can do the work. And that just blessed me. And so it got me through that stigma that you're disadvantaged. And disadvantaged people, there's certain ways that you live. There's, we look for you to mess up, to have bad grades, and you can get into that flow. But that's not God's purpose and the will of God for your life. Right. And you can become thinking that you're a victim. We're not victims, especially if we're part of God, the kingdom of God. I'm a Christian first, happen to be an African-American man or a Black man. But there's the call of God that came on my life that I realized is on my life at 21, but really it was when I was in my mother's womb. But when I realized that God had called me to preach finally, is when really I saw, man, that as a youth, there's so many things that personally that kept me down because I was believing that I was disadvantaged. I was told there's certain things you can't do because you're Black. Now, they don't come right out and tell you that, but the way the system was set up.
Sometimes I do, right?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
they do.
Yeah, but with me, it was just the system through school and the way that they talked to you and treated you. And so it was like I had to press through that. And so I'm thankful to God that I had a godly mother that instilled within all of my brothers and sisters that we have purpose in our life, and that no matter what people say. And so finally in high school, when I finally went from getting F's and D's in grade school, and in the high school, finally getting to the Dean's List, 3.0s, and in college Dean's List, it was then that I really realized that, and I want to just say this, that sometimes culture can hold you back because of the things that you believe. But you have to believe God is with us no matter what color we are or who we are, there's purpose in our lives. And so, yes, I had some adversity. You know, I've been called, you know, even since last year, I heard somebody call me the N-word. And so those are things you have to press through. And I just want to say this, you know, to all of my white brothers and sisters out there, you don't owe me no apology. You don't owe me an apology. You don't have to bow down before me. God's already done it. Jesus already paid the price for all of us. And, you know, I thank God for Pastor Ryan. I thank God for all the members of FCC. You know, hey, when I come there, I don't look to see how many black people are there, Hispanic or white. I come to church. And that's what I've learned over the years. It's about God. And all these other things that happen, they happen. And for me, I have to press through those things, the struggles of life. And so now I majored, one of my co-majors in college was Black history. I love history and I love Black history. And I've had Black people get upset with me because they said, well, you with this white church, you with these white people. And they don't understand. They don't understand it's the love of God in that. And so I'm just saying, yes, there's been adversity in my youth mainly, but now, you know, I get it. I get what God's trying to do. And I want to share this scripture, Acts 17:26, and have made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth. So God's purpose and will is that we all work together, love each other, and do what he's called us to do. And so I believe, Pastor Ryan, Chris, I believe that all behind all this stuff that we see, that we can't forget that we have an enemy that's at work to keep people at each other. And I believe, because I believe in the teaching of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I believe that we all can live here together and share what God has for us, the fruit of this earth that God's given us. Yeah. But yet work. And that's what I'm trying to do now in my ministry, job as a Community Initiative Reduce Violence Project Director. I'm trying to bring people together, and that I'll stop there and let Chris introduce himself.
Yeah. Well, there was some stuff that I almost kind of want to jump in and ask there, but let's jump over to you, Chris. What was it like for you growing up as an African American kid?
Basically, I mean, like, I was a Black kid that grew up in the suburbs. So, you know, my whole life I was around nothing but white people. You know, from elementary school, there was myself and two other Black kids. One just happened to be my brother. And then in middle school, there was still just a few of us. And in high school, we had maybe, I'll say, like about 10 or 11 of us. But, you know, growing up in North Canton and, you know, going to the schools, I would say the biggest thing that I can be appreciative of is that I always, no matter what school, elementary, middle school, and high school, I always had a teacher who looked after me. So, you know, like, you have things that happen, unfortunately, but they do happen. But, you know, I thank God for a teacher that I'm still really close with to this day, because she helped me get through high school. High school is where I figured and felt like the most diversity and things like that, and just like how people really aren't always for people of color. Right. But, you know, and I have a way of basically, I don't bite my tongue for anyone. And so, you know, and she didn't care. She just would, every single day, she just would, like, you know, today's not the day and you don't really have a choice but to make it. And she was like, you know, the world is against you, but you have to make it. And she would tell me that every single day throughout high school. And so I just really am thankful for that, because between her and my mom, I just don't really know, like, how I would have been able to just kind of, like, always push through it, because you do get upset about it. You do get frustrated, you do get angry, and you do want to lash out, but you have to push through it, because at the end of the day, this is life. And so, and I didn't really, even after that, I experienced the most, like, racism and adversity when it came to working. And because people will let you know how they really feel. They might not outright say it, but they do let you know. And they do it in their own ways, whether it's, you know, by the amount of shifts that you get until you actually, you know, can get into like, you know, a full-time salaried position, you know, or how they speak to you and things like that. So you have to sometimes just push through it, take the back seat, and just know that you don't have any other choice but to kind of outwork and outsmart people to kind of make their way through it. And not everyone grasped onto that.
Right.
And I also know that because I, you know, went to North Canton, most Black people will tell me that obviously, like, you know, that I'm like, most Black and white people tell me I'm the whitest Black person that they've ever met. And, you know, but I just don't think just because you're articulate and you have an education that means that you can't excel in life. And so you go back and forth with that, but you do have to fall back on God and just say, you know, help me get through it. My wife even today just told me to stop looking at everything online and, you know, reading different things, because she's like, it's not doing anything but making you frustrated, which is true. But once again, you push through it and you rely on God and just kind of, you know, keep on moving along.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. So you guys, one of the things I appreciate about, one of the reasons I wanted you both on this, in this conversation, not just because you're two Black men, but you do have different backgrounds, right? Chris, you kind of said like you grew up in North Canton, kind of like in the suburbs, and Walt, you grew up kind of in the projects.
Yes.
And yet you both had, I mean, they're different challenges, right? But you've both had challenges. And one of the words that, as you were talking, Walt, that you kind of kept saying in there was, I like how you phrased that, Walt. You said you used the word system a lot. There's a system that exists that was kind of, I'm trying to even think how, and I'm trying not to butcher it, but because of the color of your skin, it was people they assumed that you couldn't rise above, or you were held down, and you had to persevere and overcome that. And you even said, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think you said, I knew my potential.
Right.
There was a system that existed that seemed like it was kind of, that people assumed that you could rise above.
Right.
Does that sound accurate? I'm not
sure. Yeah, it already classified me as disadvantaged because of where I live, in the school I went to, and I was a person of color. So it was assumed that I was disadvantaged and I could only do, you know, so much.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was telling you guys before we hit record about a conversation that I was having just the other day with someone that I really love and has a good heart. But we were just kind of talking through all the current events and everything that's happening, and we were talking about just the reality of like this systemic racism.
Right.
And this person, not meaning, you know, we're all trying to process it. And one of the things that I think, I said this to you again before we got on here, I said, like, my greatest fear is that I'll say something wrong or whatever, because I'm trying to walk this out with as much love. And I think we have to have grace for one another as we're trying to have better understanding, right? And and trying to grow. And I don't think we can grow if we're not asking and stretching and that kind of stuff. But this person I was talking to kind of talked about, well, African Americans, you know, and white people don't, this person not really understand, said like African Americans and white people don't understand, African Americans don't understand they have the same ceiling as white people. And I said, I don't know that that's true. I said, I think they do. And I think the reality is they exist in a world where they kind of start in the basement and we get to start on the first floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's something that makes sense, or if I'm right, but it's going back to that system that exists, or the basement might not even be accurate. You know, we're starting on the third level and you're down a few floors because of the system that's been perpetuated for 400 years.
Right.
Do you guys want to speak into that? I know, Walt, you already kind of spoke into it, but maybe Chris, do you want to speak into that a little bit? Some of the things that as and just you've lived.
I just think that, you know, education wise, you know, starting off, I mean, like, you know, for an example, systematically, me going to North Canton City schools and, you know, Rev Moss going to basically, you know, Canton City schools, that's a no-brainer. That just kind of goes to show you, and everyone's just like, well, you know, why didn't your parents, you know, moved, like, you know, his parents put him in that school district. When it comes to affordability, you know,
Right.
we all know that, you know, North Canton is a higher cost of living, and it has been for years, you know, and I'm 30. And so, like, I know that if it was a higher cost of living, then more than likely it was a higher cost of living, you know, when he was growing up. So, you know, like, that's just how it starts off there. But then, especially when you get into the workplace, you know, I've never had a job that I have not had to basically persevere and outsmart and outwork people in order to get to where I need it to be. And that's just kind of how it breaks down. But I know that when it comes down to like pay, I also know that when it comes down to putting your full name on a resume properly, you know, like, I've never used my full name on an application, never.
Mm.
And I've
Wow.
never, you know, like, I have my mortgage license, my middle names. I have 2 middle names. They're not on my mortgage license. You know, I
Wow.
have my notary. They're not on there, because when you submit them, and I've seen it firsthand, you know, being in the office, when they get submitted, whether they come through email or it's a paper resume, they don't get looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, my name is Christopher Lynch, and most people would think that that's a white man's name. And then, you know, they have my, you know, I do the phone interview, things like that. And then all of a sudden they look at like, oh, well, what the crap is this? Like, I've never seen this before. And they just don't, you see it, you feel it because you experience it, you know, but like, they're just like, well, I didn't think that this was going to happen. I didn't know that this was who was coming here. But like, once you kind of get in there and you move throughout, then they tell you that anytime that you would have, you know, basically try to apply to, you know, to advance, there's always something else. But then you can see someone else who doesn't even do as well as you do, and they automatically easily move up. You know, like, that's just how it goes. But education is any African American person's, truthfully, it's their best friend, because that's the only way that it kind of helps them even get anywhere closer to the same playing field as a white person. And I just
Right.
don't think that that's what society understands, because there's some people who can work for their mommy and daddy, and they worked for mommy and daddy for X amount of years, and then all of a sudden they can go work at Merrill Lynch, and they don't even have a degree. But you can't even get in the door if you don't have that education, no matter where you worked at, because you were never really allowed the same, you know, you were never allowed like the same experiences and opportunities. And it's different. And I just don't think that America or society in general understands that. But I feel like at the same time they do, because they allow it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? So obviously, we saw just the heartbreaking and the horrible moment where George Floyd's life was taken from him last week, right? And then there were obviously numerous other things recently, very recently, similar, just heartbreaking moments that happened where African American people were harmed at the hands of folks that it looked like there was racial motivation, right? And this stuff has been going on for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? I'm just curious, and I don't even necessarily know that there's a right answer to this, but what it seems like right now, like Chris, you and I were talking on the phone for a second earlier today, and we kind of talked about this, but like it seems like for whatever reason, there was a tipping point this week. Like it seems like anytime that there's an African American person who's killed or harmed by, you know, a police officer or whatever, there's outrage, and then it's like on to the next news cycle. But it doesn't feel like that this time. I don't know
No.
about you guys, but it doesn't feel like that, and I think that's a good thing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think it is? Do you think America is finally just like, okay, like enough is enough already? Like let's open our eyes. What I don't know. I don't even really know where I want to go with this. I guess I'm just kind of curious. The outrage just finally seems like enough is enough.
Like I told you earlier, I think that this is like the first time where basically 4 instances happened within 30 days.
Mm.
And then on top of that, you know, like they watched a man be murdered, and you know, and that it wasn't a movie. It just was, you know. And then any human, whether you are a parent or not a parent, you know, when you hear that man like basically begging for his life and pleading and calling for his mom, you do understand and realize one thing about that is that you don't have to be a parent to understand what that feels like, because for most people in general, when you are in trouble, the only person that you feel like can save you besides God is your mother.
Amen.
And so like that's where, you know, I think America got it. Then when it came to the Christian Cooper situation, you know, like this woman, she turned on an act. All he did was ask her to put her dog on a leash, and she turned on a full damsel in distress act, and they saw it. And I just think that, you know, even when it comes to Ahmaud Arbery, it's like, even if, okay, like, yeah, he was going through the construction home and things like that, but there were also other people who did it, but you can see that, you know, something didn't go right. And America saw it. America had questions. America was like, why is this continuing to happen? And, you know, even hearing what the, you know, the guy said as he shot him, you know, it's like, why, like, what's going on? And even for Breonna Taylor, you know, she was asleep in her own bed and she didn't know. Obviously, her boyfriend didn't know. But America has questions, and the people who have the questions it doesn't matter what they look like anymore, because it's America, and it doesn't matter if you're white, black, whoever. You want to know why this is continuing to happen and why there's no one being punished for it.
Yeah. And Reverend Moss, one of the things, being a minister, one of the things that I think we're starting to see, like I said, like it seems like this is the tipping point. Fourth in 30 days, and I think everyone's just like, it just feels like something is shifting. Starting to see, you're starting to see organizations, big companies that are committing to more diversity in their leadership. You're starting to see more commitment from universities and just all sorts of, you're seeing, I feel like just in this last week I've seen so many things where people are like, it's just like the light is kind of going on, it's turning on. It's not there by any means. There's a long way to go, but it's like maybe something's changing. But I also believe this. I think that it's not going to be legislation. It's not going to be organizations that bring the kind of change that I think is really necessary. I think this is a hard issue. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Just kind of the spiritual nature of all this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Chris said. What you're saying too, it's the matters of the heart, and you can't legislate morality. We can't legislate to tell people, and even the police officers, we can't legislate to them. It's through their training, it's through their heart. And I'm on the governor's policing community committee, which have been working for 3 years with police departments all over the state of Ohio, and dealing with this very issues. And it comes down to people's heart also. And, you know, I know that some people are saying, oh, defund the police, but I mean, to do something like that, then we got to have some ordinance in our society. But I think it's the matters of heart. And I think, as you said, it is a good thing now. And also with Chris, I think, you know, it's a lot of young people now who are really speaking up and really realizing that they need to be engaged, you know, in our society. And I think on the end with the police, one of the things that we miss, because we see it happen here in Canton, we had a community policing team, and a year and a half ago, they totally dismantled it to one officer. And to me, you're defeating the purpose, because the officer, there were a couple of days where I would walk with a police officer in community, in neighborhoods. We would knock on doors, introduce him, that he's going to be here for at least a year, so people get to know him. And now they've shifted that. So I think my recommendation, and we have a meeting with the mayor and the safety director, the chief coming up, and our recommendation is that community policing will be pushed back to the top of the list because
Yes.
it's relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So I know, Reverend Boss, also you've been downtown a lot this week, just trying to kind of you've led some rallies and some prayer time Friday night. I know that you were down kind of trying to keep the peace a little bit. I think Monday night or somewhere in there. And I just want to thank you for your love for this community, your love for the Black community, your love for trying to keep some unity there. Let's talk about just the protests a little bit, and I don't want us to get distracted. I think one of the heartbreaking things that we're seeing is some of the stuff that I've seen online is it becomes really easy for some to get upset about the protests and forget about the part behind the protests, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. I also think that at the same time, man, I don't know. I would love to hear your guys' hearts on that. Actually, I don't even want to.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your heart on that, Chris.
I just feel like you can't tell people truthfully how to deal with generational trauma. This is, years of pain and hurt and trauma, whether it was from the police or if it was, from just employment, or people, regularly in the community, like people are upset about the stores and things like that. But you have to remember one thing, if there are Black people who spend their money in those places of business and they're not appreciated, valued, and respected, then they don't see any value in it, So you have to remember that you can't tell someone that this is right and this is wrong. I understand that, yes, there are, my wife and I, we have a business and you don't want anything bad to obviously happen to your business. But if you just have to understand both sides of it, and that's just you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and obviously you want everything to be peaceful, but I can tell you one thing, like every single day, we're witnessing basically a fearless generation out there on the front lines who are not afraid to say anything. They're basically telling you that they are wanting equality, and they're also letting America know that we want to be seen and we want to be heard. We have a message that we need you to change how things are going. And they're waking up every day basically between two places. Either do they want to be like Martin Luther King or do they want to be Malcolm X? And it's like, where do we go from here? Because it is a heart issue. But the people who we see out there who are trying to push forward and do the right thing with the protests, especially peacefully, you can see their hearts. Right. And, you can, even with the protests in Canton, the protest that was in Alabama that literally broke your heart, and I was watching it, you see it. And so I just don't think that you can people can let the rioting and the looting kind of diminish that, because there are so many other peaceful things happening, and we've seen it every single day this week.
Yeah, and that stuff's the big story too, right? And so I'm certainly not saying that the peaceful stuff hasn't been publicized as well, but that's the big story. And so that's what's the big view. And it's a little misleading because there's been an awful, like I just mentioned, Pastor Walt, you led a thing Friday night that was peaceful, it was covered in prayer. And those aren't the moments that are always being highlighted.
And Brian, one thing I kind of kicked myself is that I didn't inform the media about that, because that kind of happened so fast for Friday. Yeah. And I said, now, the media, they were there when those, the protesters were tear gassed. And I said, man, it wouldn't have been great for them to come downtown also and see that there were people, white and Black. Mm-hmm. You know what? We had some little mixed girls their mama were white, their daddies were black, who got up and spoke. And they were saying that they were so fearful and afraid, and that they get it from different sides because of the color of their skin. And that just really, really, really touched my heart, because sometimes we forget how this, and you, Chris, you mentioned the word trauma. We forget how this affects all of our children. I'm talking about little kids, 7, and this little girl, 8 years old. And one little girl had a sign, and I'm going to text it to you, Pastor, had a sign, "Love thy neighbor as yourself," on top of her dad's shoulders. And the little sister, but underneath her, she was the one that spoke. And she said, it was just awesome. And we can't forget about the effect that this has on especially our little children, and try to tell them what's going on. But also, I want to say that Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., we're having another community prayer at Trinity Gospel Temple in their parking lot. And we're just saying we want to pray for our nation, for our communities, for peace. And anyone is welcome to come 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, this Tuesday coming evening.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Very cool. Well, one of the things that I preached a message on this probably about a year and a half ago. And one of the things that I talked about in that message was the goal is for us to love, right?
Amen.
Our neighbor as ourselves. But I don't really feel like love is more than this like surface level thing, right? Love there's depth to that. I don't feel like you can love unless you understand. You gotta go. Okay, go swimming. They're going swimming. I don't feel like you can really truly love the way that you're called to love unless you can understand where another person is coming from. And I don't feel like you can really understand unless you can empathize, right? And I think that's one of the areas where we struggle the most, because we've become a society and a world of if something makes you uncomfortable, change a channel, right? If something makes you we're just change a channel, just move on, don't think about it, don't process it, if you're uncomfortable, if you don't like it, just close your eyes, pretend it's not there. And it's been disastrous for us as a culture and a society. And one of the things that again, that I'm just praying for our nation, for our community, is that we can empathize, that we can feel each other's pain, that we can feel each other's heartache, no matter the pigment of our skin, that we can feel that. And I had this thought as I was kind of, as I was praying through our conversation, is one of the things that I think is normal for all of us is we are homogenous. God, for whatever reason, created us to be homogenous people, right? So we're drawn to people that we have something in common with. It's just how, I don't know why, it's more comfortable for us, right? And so you walk into a room and there's, you're from this area and there's a bunch of Ohio State fans, or there's a bunch of Michigan fans. We're all going to go to the Ohio State fans because that's who we feel comfortable around, right? That's a surface level, silly illustration. But here's what I started to think about is, and I think this goes back hundreds of years, but we have homogenized around the wrong things. And so for us as believers, the thing that we're supposed to, as we've been talking about this whole time, the thing that we have in common more than anything else is our oneness in Christ. And yet we've made Sunday morning the most segregated time in America. We've made the churches has become, you have white churches and black churches. And one of the things that a couple of years ago that I was talking to someone about, so I wanted FCC to continue to grow in diversity. And I still have that heart, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's hard. It is a hard thing to try to navigate. I have, as we've tried to like hire positions at the church, I'll joke with people on our staff as we're like not joke, and just in like if you are an African American person, like you're going to have a heads up with me because I want to diversify our church, and it has been so hard to continue to make those strides. What do you think we could do as a church to continue to grow in this area, knowing that leadership is committed to it, but man, it is it has been a challenge to try to find individuals uh, to join our staff. Not because they're not out there, but I just haven't been able to find them. And I don't know, I'm just looking in the wrong places. But what other strides do you think we could continue to make to just grow in oneness as a church?
Well,
I
Pastor,
think praying. Go
I
ahead.
think
Go ahead.
church has been doing, and maybe you don't know, I've seen African American people there. They haven't joined, but I've seen a lot of African Americans come to the church, to services.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's a way that, I don't know, is follow some way of following up with them. But I just think that I've seen many come. And I guess it's just, I don't know, it's a way, we can follow up with them. And I guess the other piece of that is, as far as, I know you have done a lot of things, videotaping downtown and things like that. But I would think also that one of the things you might want to think about doing is maybe highlighting some of the African American businesses and entrepreneurs. We have one Black-owned radio station, and I think that when people see that, that the church cares about these organizations, I'm talking about in the city, I think that will let people know, hey, we're open to you to come here and to become a member.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
I just think that, like even when we had this conversation before, when we did the panel, I think that a lot of it is going to come from obviously just continue to pray through it. But there has to be trust there.
Right.
Even with the whole 1201 thing, I have my technically 3 that I've been praying for. And, I got my friend to come, one time, and it's, oh yeah, I'll come back, which is awesome, and then, COVID happened, and then it's like, oh, I guess, we're not going. So
COVID's been a major buzzkill, let's be honest.
But, I think that for the majority of it, it's a lack of trust, and it's a lack of comfortability for a lot of people. And it's that, what do we really do? And I obviously, it's not like you can go seek out employment, basically you can't go seek out potential employees and things like that by just randomly, talking to people, because depending on what the position is for, you obviously need to make sure that whoever you're going to conversate with, that they would be a qualified candidate. But I think that if you want to continue to press forward with this, if you can get on the page of potentially doing some diversity in your leadership, to where if you do have someone in leadership who is of color, they don't have to necessarily be Black, but if they are of color, it will help, because it kind of lets them know, okay, yeah, they really are accepting of me. And so I think that that's one way to do it. But obviously, as right now, I don't even know if the church has any positions open for anyone in leadership. But if there were to be something, I think it's something to definitely look into. And even when you're looking for it, just continue to encourage anyone and everyone to apply. And that's just how, obviously, and if it takes you a little while to fill the role, it takes you a little while. Yeah. But you can't necessarily put it out there and be like, hey, I just want someone of color to fill this role. Because then you'll just upset everyone.
A few minutes ago, but no, yeah, obviously you want qualified individuals, but it is something that God has put on my heart that I would love for us to continue to diversify as a church, and I do think that starts with leadership and with staff. And Chris, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that trust is a huge part of that, especially if there are coming into a white church. I mean, that's that a predominantly white church. I mean, that can be, there's a lot of trust things that have to be established there. So, I do think that's big. And I guess I would say this too is, just kind of speaking as a white guy, and the pastor of the church. I think when we have people, whatever ethnicity, not just African American, whatever ethnicity, and I would hope it would be this way no matter who it is. But I think it goes a long way for our folks at the church to reach out and to take that extra step if you see a minority come to the church, to help them feel loved and help them
Hmm.
feel accepted. Um,
Absolutely.
and so that would just be, and that's kind of your story, isn't it, Chris? At FCC, wasn't it like an older white couple that like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And I think that, I mean, also, it is nice that, like when we actually are there at church, like, I work in the hub, like in the welcome center. And so like, it's nice to where when people do come there, and then, like they do have like, Mai's out there, and a few other people, to where it is nice to see someone who looks like you when you walk in there, especially if it's not something that you're used to. Because that automatically at least like takes down part of the barrier.
yeah,
And I don't know if this is something else to possibly consider, but when it comes to I don't know if it like just like even a life group, basically for people of color, and if it can help. It might not help everyone. Like, for me, I don't know if a life group would have been beneficial to me, because, the couple who welcomed me and asked me to sit with them every single Sunday that I came, I wouldn't have needed it, but for some, it might be necessary.
it helps you feel, I guess, a little more that homogenous thing. But at the same time, it would be good and stretch people to. But I get what you're saying, and I'm not trying to discredit that. Like, it
And
would
I think,
feel a little
yeah,
safe and make you feel a little safer, probably.
Yeah, at least initially, like,
Mhm.
just at least kind of like, like show you the ropes, because it is, when you walk in those doors on a Sunday morning, it is overwhelming. You got everyone's kids running around, you got all these adults basically moving in all these directions, and you're like, oh my, like, like the parking lot sometimes can even be overwhelming. Like my little boy, like, even on the way to the, like, basically the childcare, I mean, he just takes off and he goes running, and, you got like these adults, running after their kids and stuff. So you already have that going on,
Mhm.
and you already know that you're walking into a larger church. So you don't want to be a misfit or feel like you're being left out or overlooked. So I just think that, and, even if it were someone like Mai and Jen, like Sean's wife, I mean, like that'd be perfect, because, you get someone in there who is able to understand and speak to all people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me just throw two other things at you. One of the questions is kind of similar to that, but I think a little bit more bigger picture. And actually, I'll do that one first. Um, what can what can what can I do? And when I say I mean, I'm not talking as a pastor. I'm not talking as not me. Okay, but what can, as a white man right now in the year 2020, what can I do to try to be, from your guys' perspective, to try to be some sort of force of good or some sort of help right now? Because I think there are a few people that kind of just feel like, listen, I'm just one person. What difference can I make, or what good can I do? What can the average white individual do to try to help with racial injustice and with racial understanding right now, from your guys'
well,
perspective?
well, I just think what you're doing now is talking. We talk about it, and one
Yep.
of the words that I wanted to use earlier, and all that you're talking about for the church, is you have to be intentional to break down
Mm-hmm.
barriers and walls. You have to be intentional. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said the reason we don't get along or know each other because we don't communicate.
Mm,
I think that there has to be lines of communication open, and this is what you're doing today. We're
mm,
communicating, and and then keep in mind what we've been facing is, and we talked about it before we got on the recording piece, is that we're dealing with something that has been systemic, part of the culture, part of the system, And if you want a movie that my wife and I watched last night, Just Mercy, I tell you, I cried in that movie. And it's a PG-13 movie, and I cried in that movie. And if you want to see what systemic is, watch that movie, Just Mercy. It was free. I got it on my phone for free, and that will show you. And so being intentional in what you do and what you say to people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think being intentional, being genuine with it, and I also think that holding people accountable who look like you, because too often, like we see it and no one does anything about it, no one says anything about it. But if more white people would step up and just speak up when they do witness something, it will go, it goes a long way. And reaching out to people, like I've had friends who'll text me and just, like they say, like, hey, I'm sorry, but, I've been thinking about you and praying about you. I just want to let you know that I love you. And yes, it is appreciated because, my wife is white. My best buddies are white. And so, it's definitely appreciated. And you have to remind people who are close to you, who don't look like you, you have to remind them of that, because they have no clue unless you tell them to confirm basically where you stand at in a moment like right now. Because like you can't just be silent. And your silence says that we don't know where you stand. And so if you can, I would just say, teach your children the right way, be intentional, be genuine with your message, and just hold people accountable. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. So just treat everyone. It's the golden rule. It just, this time around, it needs to apply to everyone.
Amen.
That's good. That's really good. So last question then. Walt, you talked about Tuesday night, the prayer gathering that's happening. What other things are there things that we can do locally?
Well, pray for our local officials, our mayor, our president of the council, our police chief, and the safety director. And we have a meeting scheduled with them Tuesday afternoon. I have some pastors. A lot of pastors wanted to meet, but you can only get so many in the room. And we're just going to talk to them about some of the things we like to see changes. But after that, we will have opportunity for other people. The prosecutor was talking about, let's form some type of coalition that it doesn't just meet, when there's issues, but there's ongoing, and we monitor what's going on in our community. So there'll be opportunity for people to support, pray for, and be a part. But I say our community really, and the nation really is a time of need of prayer. We pray for, I pray for all the Bible tells us we got to pray for all those in authority. And I just said we need to do that. Pray for all these elected officials on all levels, and pray for peace for our nation. And take it a step at a time. And I think I'm trying to be intentional in what I do. And so, we're all in the same boat. We're on the boat called Earth, and called the United States of America. And we got to get along. We got to live together, and love thy neighbor as thyself is what I'm hearing God say to me. Yeah.
Well, I love you guys, and I'm grateful for you. So grateful for you guys getting on here, and any sort of parting words of wisdom before we jump off?
Do you have something? I just thought you were going to...
I'm putting you guys on the spot. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I honestly, I would just say, these two things, like, truthfully, it really does start with just a simple conversation, especially when you lack the understanding. But you don't have to fully understand to take a stand. And so, if you can start the conversations, express empathy, and just notice someone, and, even possibly, add a little bit of appreciation and value to someone, it goes a long way. And that's just what I think we have to remember right now. We have to be able to empathize, and we have to be able to have the conversations, whether they're going to be hard or not. But you just don't have to fully understand to take a stand right now and stand up for what's right.
Amen.
Good. Good.
Ditto.
Perfect. All right. Well, hey guys, again, thank you so much for jumping on here and being part of this. And I think our folks, I can speak for FCC and whoever else is listening to this that may not even be a part of our church. I think that there's a lot of really good stuff here, and so I really appreciate you guys and just your hearts. And so
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for being on, and we'll get back to church soon. It's
All right.
it's coming. So until then,
Fair enough.
until then, we'll keep our social distance, I guess. But it's coming. So, all right. Well, I love you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye
We
bye.
love you back, man.
All right.
Thanks.
See you later.